By the fourth quarter last year, it was growing at a rate of 5.9%. So think about that kind of swing. We have a $14.5 trillion deficit, but we've seen our economy shift by about 12.3 percentage points. That's more than $1.5 trillion in just over a year. The job numbers that came out last month were very encouraging. Employers added over 162,000 positions in March, including 17,000. That's old school, rad. The handkerchief is all right. That's when your mama said, let me bring my washcloths out of the house. Get my washcloths back in the house. And so the stimulus package is working. As evidence of that is the cultural trail. How many of you know about the cultural trail? Right outside, a few yards outside of this building. We work with the Department of Transportation. We had some assistance from the mayor's office, and we were successful in securing a $20 million grant to finish and complete the cultural trail. It's going to produce hundreds of jobs. It's controversial right now, but it's going to produce hundreds of jobs. Also, as a result of the cultural trail, we're going to see more small businesses who will line up on that trail, thus hiring more Hoosiers, getting our economy back on track. In the midst of that, it's going to boost tourism. It's going to spur more folk to come visit the great Hoosier state. And I can tell you this, people are so excited about the things that are happening in Indianapolis. As a result of the stimulus package, we had the Department of Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood visit our Amtrak facility. And some of you who weren't following that, just over a year ago, over 100 Amtrak workers in Beach Grove, Indiana were laid off. We got on the horn. We called Vice President Joe Biden, and we worked with the administration in securing $60 million and bringing it back to the great Hoosier state. As a result of that effort, not only did they retain those employees that they hired, they rehired them, and they hired 108 more employees. So the Recovery Act is working. When there were housing issues that affected Indiana, we were ranked number 12 in the nation with some of the worst housing disparities in the country. We work with the administration. We work with the housing agency. We secured over $29 million to refurbish dilapidated buildings, putting more Hoosiers back to work. But it's one thing to put Hoosiers back to work, and it's another thing to educate them. Which brings me to my wife, who's an educator. Mary Alma is an award-winning teacher in Pike Township. And she looks better than me, but she gives me insight because I can remember being a proud graduate of IPS. And Carrie Officer and I used to hang out back in the day, but being a proud graduate of IPS, I can tell you I had superior teachers and I had mediocre teachers. I had teachers who encouraged me, and I had teachers who discouraged me and wanted to embarrass me. I'll never forget an algebra class, Manual High School. Yeah. I won't say the teacher's name. But a few of us were laughing at something, as kids do. And she pulled me out of the audience, the class, and said, in front of my peers, and said, you see this man, André, right here, this young guy right here? He'll never be anything. He's worthless. Now go to the principal's office. Now she could have said that privately, and I could have had an excuse and made something up to save face. But think of the irresponsibility that went unchecked by that teacher. Hurt me for years. Hurt me for years. Think of the number of students who get those kinds of inputs. Young African-American men and women who get those kinds of inputs, and Latino brothers and sisters, and white brothers and sisters, who get those kinds of inputs on a daily basis. That kind of atmosphere reflected my grades at the time, and they weren't good. And so for me to succeed, it took different teaching styles and methodologies. I can remember seeing so many kids, peers, in special ed at that time, misplaced. But when you look at their writings and their pad, they were young MCs and young poets. You saw prolific lyrics. You saw metaphor. You saw simile. You saw control of the English language, but they just needed encouragement. We need to make the kind of investment in schools that is so critical. Some of us are different learners. Some of us are visual learners. Some of us are auditory learners. Some of us are kinesthetic learners who like to feel and touch things. We have to have an apparatus in our public school system that will speak to our different learning styles. And that can be done in a public school context. You know, just last year, IPS, the Center for Inquiry, received a 2009 Blue Ribbon designation for excellence. And the principal of this magnet option school is a gentleman by the name of Chris Colley. And he said that the school's success largely comes from the fact that every classroom is hands-on, engaging the student. Our goal as a nation needs to be more about making sure that these kinds of schools are less unique and more the norm. We've got to bring alternative learning models in these schools, and we have to do it now. I think charter schools, we've seen some success with charter schools. But not all charter schools are created equally. In fact, most of them have proven to be pretty mediocre, but that's not an indictment against charter schools, because I wish I probably had attended some of these excellent charter schools growing up. But that same investment, Madam Pat, must be made in IPS. I had a chance of meeting with to meet with Dr. White just a few weeks ago, and they're doing some phenomenal things. And when they were having some budget setbacks, and when the recession was taking toll at IPS, we worked hard. Robin Winston, if you don't tell folks what you're doing, they don't know. We worked hard to get funding for IPS so they could retain and rehire over 200 teachers. And those teachers are still working. I tell you what, next year, when we vote on the budget and we do appropriations, we're going to make sure IPS gets additional money to hire teachers and keep those teachers. We have to build new minds. I see the next Oprah Winfrey in this audience. I see the next Martha Stewart in here. I see the next Jay-Z. I see the next Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. But we have to give our students a base of knowledge and nurturing that they can work forward and work from. Standardized testing is okay. It's a means of measuring success. But if teachers are bogged down with teaching to a test, there's no real learning going on. We have a great opportunity coming up, though, hopefully this year. And that's my hope. We're going to meet with the president later on this week and talk about reforming No Child Left Behind. Now, given our economic downturn, if we don't catch up to China, if you go to some of these schools, and my wife will tell you, our fellow citizens, or our fellow humans who are English as second language students, are outperforming African and male students 2-to-1. They're outperforming white brothers and sisters, Jewish brothers and sisters, Latino brothers and sisters 2-to-1, especially our friends from China. So we have to get a grip and free our teachers up and support the teachers who are doing well. It's not about class size. I mean, that's good. But you could have a class full of 40 kids with a superior teacher, or a class full of 15 kids with a mediocre teacher, and the outputs will be different. So we have to reform No Child Left Behind. While we address the educational issues that plague this nation, we can't forget about, once you get educated, you have to stay educated, but you have to stay healthy to get a job and stay on the job. How many of you in this room have asthma? Raise your hand. How many of you in this room have high blood pressure? Raise your hand. High cholesterol? Raise your hand. Diabetes? Raise your hand. All the ladies, raise your hand.